What's up guys, today we're going to be revisiting another classic phone, the LG G7. So we haven't talked about this phone in a long time and I wanted to revisit this phone, not because I think you guys should necessarily buy it. I think it's a pretty good buy for a backup phone, or if you like me and you just like to collect them and stuff like that. They're like 75 bucks right now. And I was just using it and it's still a pretty good phone, but this phone was pretty essential to sort of building the channel and really getting me into older flagships to see the value in older flagship versus budget phones and mid-range phones. This phone was extremely essential. I had mained it for I think like a year as well, so still really love this phone. So let's go ahead and just dive into it. One of the things that I really like about the G7 is actually this build quality. It feels really good in the hand. It's not too big of a device. It's a 6.1 inch phone, so it's not too big, but it has a really nice build. It's not too boxy and it's very easy to hold. Not only that, but I really like this sort of, I think LG calls it like a raspberry color. It looks pretty good to me still. I really like this color. You can see it sort of gets darker, when it's not hitting the light, and when it hits the light, sort of get like that really cool effect. It's still a very premium device. It's IP68, dust and water resistant. It has the headphone jack with the quad DAC. It has one single speaker, and we'll get to that, but one single boombox speaker, which still is one of the most amazing single speakers that I've ever heard in any smartphone. It's really loud, especially when you put it on the table. And then you have your physical fingerprint scanner right here, which I was never a big fan of putting the fingerprint scanner back here. I've always preferred it like in the power button if it's going to be physical, but it's fine. And then we have our dual camera setup, of course, but very comfortable phone to hold. Now the screen on the G7 is still good, even till this day in 2023. It's an IPS LCD display. And what's pretty interesting is that the notch on this phone is still smaller than the notch you would see on the iPhone. So I thought that was pretty funny when the iPhone had a notch. But it's an IPS display. It's actually a full 1440p display, so it's super sharp as well too, and it's very high PPI at 564. Now some people on the channel say they prefer the IPS panels, but like I said, I think the industry has pretty much moved to OLED panels and stuff like that. But this is still a pretty good IPS panel. Like I said, very sharp. It still has a pretty good amount of color to it as well too, and like I said, just the icons and everything on this display just super sharp. Everything is like crystal clear on this screen here, so absolutely love that. And like I said, it's a pretty good display, pretty good viewing angles and stuff like that, and it's a 6.1 inch display, so even for people who have smaller hands, you can sort of navigate the phone. It's not too much of a pain to navigate. Alright, so let's talk about gaming on this older phone. So it's pretty interesting because the Snapdragon 845. Now, what I've seen here is that HDR Extreme is no longer an option on here. Obviously, since the phone came out in 2018, but it's still able to play at, smooth extreme, and it does a pretty good job with, HDR Ultra as well too. So this particular model is 128 gigs, I believe, and 6 gigs of RAM, but the base model is 64 gigs and 4 gigs of RAM. This phone does still a pretty good job when it comes to gaming in general. Of course, it's not going to be as good as Snapdragon 855 or a 65 that can play this game at, HDR Extreme, easily, consistently 60 frames. But yeah, it's still a pretty good phone for 80 bucks when it comes to gaming. And not only that, but just the phone just feels very smooth when it comes to just navigating and stuff like that. It still feels like when I first got it, just very consistent, very fast when it comes to just bouncing in and out of applications and stuff like that. Very, very fast, very, very speedy phone. You don't see a lot of animation lag with this phone. Now the boombox speaker on here is pretty impressive, so I'm going to go ahead and play it for you, and then I'm going to set it down so you'll actually hear like the massive difference here. Just a massive difference when you put it on a table. Not only that, but you can literally feel the vibration even when you just holding the phone. you can feel the phone itself vibrating. So it's a pretty cool experience. Literally how they advertise it, it really does feel like kind of like a boombox experience. So it's pretty cool how you can have one single speaker almost sound like it's a dual speaker. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. And this phone has still a lot of the modern day, features that you would find in some that are, gone, like SD card support, the quad DAC, that's not on a lot of phones these days. And also this phone still has, wireless charging and stuff like that. Next, let's talk about the cameras. So this phone has a dual camera setup. It's a 16 megapixel standard, and then you also have a 16 megapixel ultra wide. And then you also have 4K 60 video and a 8 megapixel selfie that shoots at 1080p 60. The cameras are what you would expect. They still take pretty decent shots, for what it is for an older flagship phone. But yeah, the main thing that you'll notice is that the images just look a little bit soft if you take it out of pretty much any good lighting scenario. But if it's in a good lighting scenario, like you're outdoors, it actually will still take a pretty good shot. Like, I was actually kind of impressed because this phone, remember, this phone came out in 2018 and it's still able to take pretty good shots. But like I said, the main thing is that, it just doesn't do that great in low light. And I think the selfie cam probably took the biggest hit. It just kind of very soft, just in general to me. But other than that, I think it still takes pretty decent shots. Now, as far as the battery life goes with this phone, the battery life is still kind of decent, but I think I charged it full and I just left it alone for a day and it completely died. So my battery from using it so much has probably degraded, because when I first got the phone, I definitely didn't have that problem. I could not touch it and standby time would be fine. But my screen on time, I actually can still get around like 5 hours of screen on time out of this phone still, surprisingly. But at its peak or its healthiest battery life or battery health, you could probably squeeze 6 hours out of this phone. But as the years have gone by, obviously you use it a lot, the battery's going to degrade, so it's kind of like down to 5 now. But yeah, so it's a very cool device. I really like this phone. Really love the design of this phone. The specs are still pretty good. Like I said, probably the biggest thing that stood out to me is that it's super fast. And I also always get this question: will the phone still work? Because this phone has not gotten any type of updates for years, but everything still works. Like, everything in the Play Store still works. So I get that question, guys, a lot. Typically, these phones will work for a very long time still. I have phones older than this that still work and pretty much will play anything and have any app in the App Store pretty much. So yeah, so pretty interesting, guys. What do you guys think? Be sure to let me know. I'll catch you guys in the next one.